Oh, hi, Premier. We're more than 2/3 of the way through the circuit breaker, and BC's caseload really hasn't budged. What are the chances we'll see an extension or perhaps even stricter restrictions come once that deadline is up?
Thank you, Tanya, for the question. And we are, of course, very troubled by the case count over the past 10 days. Dr. Henry will be doing a briefing and some modeling on Thursday that will give us a better sense of where we are in terms of the 7-day rolling average. But I am confident as of today, 25% of eligible British Columbians have received a first dose of vaccine. And we keep focusing on making sure that that supply that is made available by the federal government gets into the arms of British Columbians. Having said that, we're trying to play catch-up in a couple of situations, and I give full credit to public health as well as Dr. Ballum, who's in charge of the immunization program, to be flexible enough to pivot when we need to, moving away from our age cohorts and focusing on areas where there have been outbreaks, areas where we can stem the increase of the case count. And we've been using all of those tools as well as the circuit breaker public health orders that were put in place to protect British Columbians, to protect businesses for the long term. We'll see what the data shows us on Thursday. Cabinet meets tomorrow to review a host of other initiatives, so it's premature for me to comment, other than to say encouraging people to follow the orders, stay safe, physically distance, stay away from people you don't know, and for goodness sakes, let's all focus on getting through this.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. You've been resistant to bring in stricter and enforceable travel restrictions within BC. So if the situation continues to worsen and you're still not going to go that route, I mean, what other measures are on the table, or what other measures are you at least considering at this point?
Well, thank you. We haven't taken travel restrictions off the board, quite frankly. It's about how practical are they and how can we enforce. You will know that already here in British Columbia and indeed across the country, but here in BC, 106 travelers have tried to circumvent the federal quarantine rules that are governed by our border services agencies that have dedicated locations to engage with people when they're coming into Canada. And despite that, you've had 106 people who've tried in BC that have tried to circumvent that. So there are logistical challenges which we've talked about over the past number of months. But I did have a phone call, bilateral discussion with Premier Kenney yesterday on a range of issues. Among those were the concerns we both share mutually about people that come back and forth between Alberta and British Columbia, whether it be on essential travel or non-essential travel, and the consequences that's having on case counts in our respective jurisdictions. So we have not taken anything off the table, but practicality is first and foremost in our mind. What can we usefully do to protect people is always there. And we, as I say, Cabinet meets tomorrow. All of these issues will be on the table.
You just spoke about your concerns with people coming in and refusing the mandatory quarantine rules. So what can BC do to work with the federal government if, the process that it's set up is not working? What can BC do to try and work with the federal government to make sure that people are following the rules, or that these COVID-infected passengers are not coming into BC?
Well, it's not certain that the 106 individuals who tried to circumvent the quarantine rules were infected. But what I can tell you is that local law enforcement, through public safety, whether they be RCMP or municipal forces, have issued significant fines to those individuals, far in excess of what the cost of 3 days in a hotel would be. So we're working with the federal government on enforcement. Again, when you have regulated borders as we do internationally, and still people are trying to find ways to circumvent their responsibility to keep themselves and everyone else safe, the response has to be a hefty fine, and that's what's happened in this case.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. You'd mentioned that travel restrictions are not off the table, but this has been something that has been asked by yourself and asked of the province over and over, considering Manitoba and the Atlantic provinces have, their own little bubble. So is this something that the province is reconsidering, given the rise of the variants? You just mentioned your talk with Premier Kenney. So what is on the table then in terms of provincial travel restrictions?
Well, again, we did significant work on this over the past number of months, and we're listening to advice from public health officials. We're taking that advice. We're following the science. And if Dr. Henry believes that there's an opportunity for us to use some form of border restrictions, we'll look at that. The notion of what they call having people stay closer to home. Those are the issues that we've been talking about for months and months and months. And we're going to continue talking about that until we can get past the 25% dosage of vaccines that we have into people's arms. The notion of having a curfew is something that's not necessarily being particularly effective in Quebec. Some of the harsher restrictions in Ontario have not seen a decline in the case counts there. We are at a new phase of the COVID crisis. And our approach has been always to be nimble, to be focused on what we can do to keep people safe, what we can do to protect individuals, communities, and businesses. And that's exactly what we'll do. But it requires all of us working together. And on balance, I have to say that after what has been 14 extremely difficult months for British Columbians and Canadians, we're doing pretty good. That does not mean that we let down our guard at this point, far from it. And we're going to continue to look at ways to protect people, just as we're looking ways to find programs that can lift people up, as we've announced here today.